Hi, and welcome back to the channel. In the last few videos, I mentioned that I wanted to talk about how I slowly and gradually got to this banking advisor intern position I'm currently in right now. And it's been quite a long journey, I have to say. So I have to begin like from like the very beginning. So I actually moved to Canada when I was like really small. I studied elementary school here, and what happened was we decided to move back to Taiwan as a family. And what happened was I went back to Taiwan. I finished my middle school, high school, and then I decided to study in the States for university. And my parents were kind enough to let me go study in the States for university. And I studied there for 4 years for my undergraduate, and I got a computer engineering degree. And, and by that time, I was thinking I was going to stay in the States and get a job there in the tech industry. But what happened was um, they were looking more for masters and PhD people, and I didn't have the time to. I didn't want to wait around physically to grind technical questions for 6 months, like a lot of my friends do. I didn't have the time, and my parents weren't willing to provide me with any more money because it was really expensive, and they just wanted me to come. They just wanted me to somehow make a living for myself. And I felt it was about time too because I was around 22, 23. So I felt like it was time for me to grow up as an adult and be responsible for most of my stuff. So I moved here to Toronto. I'm a little bit more north, but I'm living around like in the Greater Toronto area. And as a Canadian citizen, it's much easier to find a job here. I didn't have to worry about Trump, obviously, but um, at first, I was also just grinding it out. Like, I really wanted a tech job, like all my friends. I was just waiting and getting these interviews set up and things like that. None of it actually worked out in the end. I got a few on-site interviews, but none of that actually ended up with anything because they were talking about like they were talking about you didn't have the Canadian experience. So I just went uh, massive amounts of my resume everywhere. And then this financial institution got back to me and said, you know what, we're in need of banking advisors. So why don't you come over and we'll do an interview and for the banking advisor intern um, position. They actually gave me a call first. So I was quite surprised because I was preparing for another interview, I think, for that week, but it was like a tech interview. And then they called me out of the blue. I didn't remember it was in the morning, and they said, "Hey, we noticed your profile, and we would like to ask you a few questions." And I'll contain that in another video where I go over what questions were asked on the telephone interview and the on-site interview for the financial institution. And um, basically, what happened was at a quick telephone interview, they liked they liked talking to me, so they scheduled me for an on-site interview after sending me an email confirming that they actually had the intention of interviewing me again. So they liked it. They sent me an email. I went to the on-site interview all dressed up. It was actually very, very formal, like because for financial institutions, your image would be like bankers just dressing up in suits and ties. Because normally for my tech interviews, all I did was put up like just a normal tie. I didn't even have a suit on. So I went in, a suit and tie, everything, shoes, leather shoes. It was in the winter, so it's kind of cold. Um, I went in, I talked to the interviewer for almost 40 minutes, and there was quite a lot of questions. And after the interview, um, I obviously sent a thank you letter. I always send a thank you letter to every single interviewer, and it was within 24 hours. Like right after the interview, I sent it within an hour or two. But the thing was, he never got back to me, so I was kind of worried that I didn't get in. And then I waited like a week or two, and eventually the coordinator actually called me back on the phone and said they really liked my interview and my responses, and they wanted me back on the job. So I signed some forms and agreed to some terms and conditions, and they hired me. So that's kind of coming in from the whole motion of how I got hired at a financial institution, which is kind of weird because um, the interviewer asked me the same thing. I honestly don't even think he looked at my resume that much when I was doing the on-site. He had it printed out and everything, but he didn't really care about what was on it. So I'll be covering that in another video, but it was something that was I found pretty funny. Um, but yeah, after that whole motion of getting hired, that's pretty much it because I would say like I'm lucky. There's a lot of people coming in wanting positions like this, and a lot of people already have the qualifications like the IFC or like maybe even better like the CSC or something I was mentioning before, right? So I would say it's very lucky that the institution decided to take me, and they didn't boggle over if I had any Canadian experience or anything, because they saw I was a Canadian citizen. It didn't make any sense for them to ask for like, hey, you need some Canadian experience and things like that. Sometimes companies tell you that to get in your way, even though you're a citizen. It doesn't make any sense. Like I studied in the States, I did some internships there. Yeah, it's not like it's any different, right? Like they speak English there. It's not like they speak some like Japanese or whatever. So it didn't make any sense. Companies always make that up if they don't want to use you. You can't really say anything to that. And that's just my thought. That's pretty much it. And in the next video, I'll be covering the interview process and how to prepare for it. Prepare if you actually need some tips and guides. I did a lot of interviews already with multiple companies, so I was fairly versed on and prepared on what was going to be asked. But if it's your first part-time or full-time job that you're looking for, and whether like the financial region, financial sector, I can offer some pointers and stuff and what they were asking and what they were looking for on the resume, really. So I'm going to follow that up on the next video. So if you like this video, you can thumbs up, and if you have any comments or questions, you can always leave a comment down below, and I'll try to reply to you as best as I can.